Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
So grew up in the Northeast, saw the light early, came down to the South. My mantra was, I'm going to work hard no matter where I go. So on the weekends, I want to be able to enjoy the sun. And so that's what I've been doing.
If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you've heard me talking about the Inventors Bootcamp, right? Over the last 3 years, hundreds of inventors have joined us in the Inventors Bootcamp, and we have lots of exciting success stories from our students. But guess what? The bootcamp is not for everyone. If you like to tinker with invention ideas occasionally on weekends, hoping that someday someone will buy your idea, the Inventors Bootcamp is not for you. If you think it's your job to just come up with ideas and someone else can take care of the rest, prototypes, packaging, and contacting companies, the Inventors Bootcamp is not for you. But if inventing really matters to you, if you know deep in your heart that you've got an invention ripe for success, if you're willing to learn and do whatever it takes to be successful, I'm here to help you, and the Inventors Bootcamp is your ticket, your next logical step forward. So, what is it? When is it? And how do you sign up? The Inventors Bootcamp is 5 days of live interactive Zoom meetings, Monday, August 12th through Friday, August 16th, for 1 hour each night. Teaches you precisely how to create a clear, concise marketing message, which is exactly what companies want to hear. When you join us, you'll meet other inventors, plus you get a licensing masterclass, and lots more. The next Inventors Bootcamp starts very soon, Monday, August 12th. Enrollment is open now. Just go to www.alanbeckley.com/bootcamp. Many podcast listeners, just like you, have joined the Inventors Bootcamp. Here are just a few of our success stories. Duncan Ashworth has 2 companies interested in licensing his COVID-killing floor sanitizing invention. Daryl Carter secured a business partner and licensing arrangement. His asthma relief product debuts this fall. And Julietta Hughes tested her portrait artist invention. Now she's got a clear strategy for reaching out to companies to license it. Ready to add your success story to our list? The bootcamp is your ticket. Register now at www.alanbeckley.com/bootcamp to save your seat at the August bootcamp. Want a special free early bird bonus incentive? Register by Wednesday, July 31st, and you'll get your copy of my 6+4 Fast Start for Inventors template, absolutely free. This template provides you with 6 steps you must take to create a firm foundation for your invention, plus 4 expensive gas you absolutely must avoid. To get your 6+4 Fast Start template absolutely free, make sure to register for bootcamp by Wednesday, July 31st. Again, just register at www.alanbeckley.com/bootcamp, and we'll see you in the August bootcamp. Welcome to episode number 426. Today is a rebroadcast of one of our classic favorites, episode number 348, back on October 23rd of 2023, with successful inventor Dr. Sarah Hoffe. She invented VR technology to provide realistic video renderings of the MRI experience for patients prior to undergoing the MRI to ease their concerns. I think you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did. Dr. Sarah Hoffe is the section head of GI Radiation Oncology at Moffitt Cancer Center. She is a senior member at Moffitt and joined the faculty 16 years ago. Her research and clinical interests include cancers of the esophagus, stomach, liver, pancreas, bile duct, rectum, colon, anus, as well as neuroendocrine cancers. She has extensive experience with MRI guided radiation therapy for GI cancers. Dr. Hoffe is also interested in the integration of novel digital health technologies that will improve the patient experience, such as piloting virtual reality tools in the clinic and developing 360 videos to enhance the new patient journey, for which she has won 27 Telly Awards. After completing her undergraduate studies at Brown University, Dr. Hoffe received her MD degree from the University of Vermont. She then completed a transitional year internship at Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, followed by residency in radiation oncology at Duke University Medical Center and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and fellowship at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Hoffe devotes a significant portion of her time to the promotion of medical education. She is also very involved in the education of physicians and training at Moffitt. In 2009, Dr. Hoffe was the first radiation oncologist at Moffitt to be selected as the Physician of the Year and has twice been selected as the Moffitt Clinical Mentor of the Year. You'll want to listen to this entire interview to learn how she feels inventors are always early adopters and why it is such a lonely place. Also, how bringing VR and 360 videos into the clinical experience allows doctors to inform patients and reduce their anxieties, especially when facing the news they've got cancer. And finally, how she was able to form a team with like-minded doctors and staff, as well as professors and students at the #3 art school in the world to create and launch a new VR tool for the clinic with minimum budget. Now let's get right to our interview with Dr. Sarah Hoffe. Dr. Sarah Hoffe, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Thank you, Alan. It really is a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this conversation, in fact.
Oh, thank you so much, and me too. Sarah, can you share a bit of your background with our listeners? For example, where did you grow up and go to school, and what did you do before you became an inventor?
Absolutely. I'm originally from the Northeast. So I grew up in Rhode Island, went to school in Rhode Island undergraduate at Brown University, then went all the way up to Vermont, University of Vermont, where my dad had learned to be a physician, met my mom, who's a nurse. So a lot of history up in Burlington, Vermont. Beautiful country for your listeners who know that part of the neck of the woods. And then it's actually interesting, Alan. Then I had a route where I came to Florida. I did an internship at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville and really fell in love with Florida. I did a little detour up at Sloan Kettering and Duke and MD Anderson, but then ultimately came back to Florida, where I've been now, goodness, since really 1999. I've been back in Florida. So grew up in the Northeast, saw the light early, came down to the South. My mantra was, I'm going to work hard no matter where I go. So on the weekends, I want to be able to enjoy the sun. And so that's what I've been doing. What did I do before I became an inventor? I think one of the things that I really have always been interested in, and I think your listeners can relate to this, is creativity. And I remember quite pointedly when I was an undergraduate at Brown University, speaking to one of the professors. He happened to be an emergency room physician. And I remember him saying to me, quite specifically, why do you want to be a physician? And I said, there's many reasons. Of course, like many of us, I want to help others and I have that mission. I said, but really, I have this creativity and I want to make medicine creative. And I remember the gentleman looking at me perplexed and said, but medicine is not creative. You should pick another field if you want to be creative. And so I think that thread may be throughout our conversation today, because creativity and having an idea and seeing it through is something that I've had lifelong. It's just having found the pathway to express it.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that's a common thread amongst the inventors that I've spoken to, over 200 on this podcast, that somewhere in their background, in their DNA, they became of a creative mode. Some of them grew up on a farm and you had to be creative because you had to invent things because you couldn't afford to buy them or you couldn't go miles and miles to get them. So many stories like that. And I love the story you shared about how you shared with this physician that one of the things you wanted to be a doctor was because you wanted to make medicine creative. And he scratched his head and said, medicine is not creative, which kind of proved your point, I'm thinking.
Yes, exactly, Alan. Yes.
But it is common in many professions to see people having the old expression, that's just the way we've always done it. And sometimes you question, well, why have you always done it that way? Maybe it should be done a little differently now. So,
Exactly. And I think when you're like that, and I'm sure yourself and your listeners are very much along that vein, we are early adopters. We see something, we see how it will move the needle forward, and we find ways to get on board early. When I think about that, it really is a lonely place to be. And I certainly have found myself very lonely in that place, particularly the most recently in my career in the virtual reality space. I remember, Alan, about 10 years ago when I started talking about virtual reality. And I remember quite specifically some of my wonderful administrative colleagues I work with scratching their head again and looking at me and saying, "Why do you need a virtual reality video? I don't understand. Like, why can't you make a video?" And it was very interesting just to realize how difficult that conversation is with people who are very well meaning, but they really don't get it. And I know that's been a challenge for many of your listeners, right? How do you really communicate that vision and get enough buy in so that you can move the needle forward?
so well put and such a true fact. And I just want to highlight real quick here the places that you lived. I have a slight connection in that my daughter spent about a year and a half in Northampton, Massachusetts, not too far down the road from Burlington. And I went and visited her, and we went up into Vermont. I think we went to a winery or two, and that is gorgeous country up that way. I think I've landed at the airport in Tampa before, but it's just a really gorgeous place with all the soaring bridges and the beaches and all that. So I can certainly see the attraction there as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's a certain closeness, I would say, certainly where I work, where people don't feel like they have barrier after barrier. And that's one of the things I think, Alan, that's been so gratifying for me where I am now. If I have an idea and I can figure out within my organization who might be a kindred spirit, I feel like I can just pick up the phone, call that person, meet with them over a cup of coffee and explore synergy. And I must say, that's really, I think, for all of us gratifying. You have an idea, you want to find someone, and for me, you don't have layer upon layer of people telling me, "Oh no, you can't get to that person. You can't get to that person." So I feel whether it's Florida, Tampa, I'm not really sure, but I think the culture here is very much one of openness, and I can appreciate that.
We've alluded to it, so I'd like to get to it that you are an uber busy doctor with a busy practice in Tampa as a radiation oncologist. And you've entered into the inventor realm by applying novel virtual reality tools into the clinic to improve the patient experience. Can you describe for our listeners an example of how you use this and do this?
Absolutely. I think let me start with the example first. And then if you have interest, we can talk a little bit about the navigation journey to get there. So let me talk about the real life experience first. And I will take everybody back about a year when I had a phone call with a very nice gentleman and his wife. They lived in a different part of the state, and I was seeing them on telemedicine. I know many of your listeners now see their physicians on telemedicine appointments. And I was explaining to the patient who had a rare type of cancer in his upper abdominal area that was right next to his stomach and his intestine. I was telling the patient that I did think the best way to treat him was to use what's called an MRI linear accelerator. We abbreviate it as MRI LINAC. And that is a machine that couples the diagnostic capability of an MRI with respect to visualization to the treatment unit, which actually delivers the radiation beams. So it's a 2-for-1, if you will. And what basically happened was I talked to the gentleman and I was telling him, okay, so when we're going to treat you every day for 10 days, you're going to have to slide into this narrow tube, just like an MRI tube. You're going to have to lay still for upwards of an hour, and you're going to have to intermittently hold your breath for 25 seconds at a time. Now, I know as probably people are listening, they're hearing me describe those words, and probably there could be a little anxiety out there just hearing those words. You can imagine that this patient had similar anxiety. And he had expressed that to me on the call. And he said, I am claustrophobic, so I'm not sure I can do it. And I reassured him and said, let's give it a try. So the long and short of it is, he was scheduled a few days later to come in for his appointment. My nurse came and informed me, I'm sorry, Dr. Hoff, the patient has canceled his simulation appointment, which is where we get him set up. I said, what do you mean he canceled? He said he simply is too claustrophobic, and so he's not going to do the treatment. Now, mind you, and mind your listeners, this was the best treatment for this man. He really didn't have any other good options. And this was going to represent a profound difference for his care. And so I looked at my nurse and I said, no, I'm not going to cancel the simulation. Please tell the patient I have a virtual reality prototype. I want him to come and do the experience virtually because I think he can actually do it. And so fast forward, he actually came. We put him in a virtual reality prototype that we made here with a whole team of people I can tell you about. He went through the experience. I actually had one of my medical students sit with him, put the headset on, and guide him through the experience. And not only did he emerge, Alan, saying, I can do it, he actually did it. And that was about a year and a half ago, and his cancer has been stable. So that's just one example of how this very real intervention has actually totally changed a patient's life for the better, where he probably would have just said, I'm not going to do any treatment at all. So that is why I get up in the morning.
That is such a phenomenal story, and it illustrates so clearly, and especially all of the listeners, including myself, anyone who's ever done even an MRI for 20 minutes. It is, whether you're claustrophobic or not, it is something that makes you a little uncomfortable when you see that long tube you're going to be passed into and that you got to lay still for a while, and plus this kind of rotating thing around. And so I think that's a common experience people have of at least feeling some anxiety around it. And in this case, it sounds like it was like on steroids because it could be up to an hour and all of these other things he would have to do. But the creative idea of saying, let's put a VR headset on him so he can experience it virtually, and then he can see if he can handle it or not handle it. And then if the VR works for him, so we're the real thing. And again, just think about what would have happened if he continued to insist he wasn't going to do it. His prognosis probably would not have been too good.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, it really was a game changer for this patient. We simply didn't have any alternatives. This was a patient who'd already had surgery and his cancer had come back despite having surgery. This is a patient who'd had forms of what we call systemic therapy, which are drugs to try to suppress the growth of the tumor. And the tumor had grown despite the growth of those systemic agents. So really, you're looking at a patient who was in a very difficult situation, and this truly was the best treatment for him. And so for me, being able to pioneer this and being able to see it being used, it was actually very inspiring for me. And I had the spur of the moment idea to film it. And I asked my patient, I said, hey, is it okay if we make a video around your story? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So I now can show this video. We actually won 4 Telly Awards for it, but I actually have a video that we made about the virtual reality program we do at our center and about this patient's story. And I really think it helps administrators because I think a lot of our administrative colleagues, right? Healthcare is expensive. Every time you turn around, the prices of everything are soaring. And so our colleagues are really trying to be as fiscally responsible as they can. And so when they hear something they don't understand, I really think it's our job as inventors to really help them get it. And so I think connecting at the level of the patient so they can really, like you said, Alan, feel the anxiety and experience, gosh, this is what it would be like, and then see how transformative it was for this one individual. I think that really helps our administrative colleagues. And I think to me, that's made the difference. And I've learned through my career, hey, I've got to connect with them. I'm an early adopter. I get it. I have to do things that help them see what I'm talking about. Because once I do that, it's like that aha moment, and then we're on the same page.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense to me. And as you were describing this, especially in the oncology space, I started thinking, I'm sure pretty soon you will find a much broader realm for its application. Think of medical students learning new procedures that they've never done before and learning them virtually first, or seeing in virtual, for example, as well as other kinds of patients and other kinds of circumstances. I suspect the total applications of this virtual reality into the clinical space is likely to be maybe much broader than you initially envisioned.
100%. You couldn't be more right about that. And to put it in perspective, there are many procedures that we teach our trainees. We call our trainees residents, and our trainees spend 4 years learning from us as attending physicians. And then they go out into the real world and, of course, they practice. You can envision with this technology that the attending physician and the resident physician could both put on the headsets. And then with virtual reality, the resident physician could walk the attending physician through the steps that they would actually have to make. So, to your point, you not only would be able to train your trainees how to do the procedure, but you could also proctor them. And in medicine, we have all of these continuing education courses that we have to do for maintenance of certification. And I see in the future, this would be a great way to make sure that public safety is reinforced, that our trainees come out, they know what to do, they have adequate experience, and they're delivering the best standard of care, which is what we all want. So, not only that, and then one other thing, Alan, to tag to that is this whole concept of global health. We were fortunate here to have the director of the IAEA come a year ago and give us a lecture. And so that's the International Atomic Energy Association. There's probably more letters on there. And her job globally is really to help different countries around the world who struggle with lack of resources. And she and I had a lot of conversations how some of these inventions could really help folks who are in some of these countries where they don't have access to the training that we have or to the machinery that we have. And what could we do virtually to get them trained so that they could improve the standard of care that's delivered in their own countries? Like you say, I think the spectrum of things that virtual reality can do for training, I think it's really exciting.
Oh, I think so too. And that kind of leads me a little bit to my next question, which is a related topic. And that is, you've also honed your video skills with 360 videos designed to improve the new patient experience. Can you briefly describe how the videos help new patients?
Yeah, that's a very sobering thing. I think when a patient talks to their, let's say, family physician, and the family physician says, I'm sorry, Mr. So and so, you've now been diagnosed with cancer. From the moment that diagnosis is heard by the patient to the time they enter the cancer center of wherever they're going to go, you start pulling back and thinking about that. Maybe it's 5 days, maybe it's 10 days. However many days, you start thinking of the worry, the anxiety, the fear of the unknown. And when I was interim chair of my department here, I started realizing that this was a big unmet need. And I started thinking, okay, how can I solve this problem of trying to help patients fill that time so that they're reassured that they're really not wasting time? Because I will tell you, Alan, in my experience, so many patients just get frantic. Oh my gosh, I've been diagnosed on Monday. I'm not being seen by the surgeon for 2 weeks. And so every day they're feeling like maybe I should go somewhere else. I've been searching online. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. Clock is ticking. My cancer's spreading. And it's this really ticking time mentality. And so what I wanted to show in the video We created a 360 video. I wrote the script. The script was basically a story, and it opens two men on a bench in a golf course area. So they were playing golf, but now they're sitting down after their rounds. And one man turns to another and says, "Hey, your golf game seemed off today. Are you okay?" And then the man in question says, "Actually, no, I was just diagnosed with cancer." And then the one who's asking says, "I remember when I got that call." And then we flash back and we actually film this. The patient getting the phone call, "You have cancer." And then we film this whole behind the scenes sequence. This is what happened while the patient was getting the phone call of cancer. Then we showed the steps of his physician making the call to the cancer center. And then we showed the steps of what goes on behind the scenes. Because I think that's the biggest thing for patients is they don't realize we need the records. We need to know what's going on. We need our teams to make sure that when they come, we are as up to date on their history. We know what tests they still need to have outstanding, and we try to expedite their care as efficiently as possible. And this whole video, like you say, was filmed in 360. So you could watch the video in a headset and really feel like you were immersed in the story, which some people liked. And you could also watch it on your phone. And I will tell you that some of my patients who actually watched it, they watched it before they came in. And then when they came into the center, they're like, "Oh, I feel like I've been here before because I've been navigating around in my phone." And so it was this profound sense of security and reassurance that, hey, this feels familiar to me. I know where the Red Ballet is. I know where the Starbucks is. And so all of that taught me the more that I can do as a provider to desensitize the fear of the unknown for patients, the better off the patients are going to be.
That's particularly interesting. And what I was thinking about as you were describing that story and going through that was whenever you get the diagnosis for cancer, it's incredibly fearful, right? All of us are suddenly facing death or potentially facing death in a much more up close and personal way. And we don't know what the next steps going forward are. And knowing that and knowing behind the scenes and knowing what the medical professionals are going to be doing in those next steps, that must be quite reassuring. You're far from not the only person who's been through this journey, and there is a plan for your recovery, et cetera. So I think that becomes an amazing tool.
Yeah, I found the same. I found the same. I found it really takes the anxiety down because when I think of it, it's not only the patient, right? It's the patient, it's the caregiver, it's the son in California, it's the daughter in New Jersey. Well, cancer affects all of us in such a profound way. And it's particularly magnified by those who aren't going to be here with their loved one because maybe they can't get a flight for the appointment. And so all the fear and the anxiety of the unknown can be magnified even further. So you think of this technology as a way to cut that away, to get everybody on the same page, decrease the anxiety so they can focus on the journey ahead. And so I think you'll see more of that throughout healthcare. I think more and more providers are starting to realize that this is the future. And I'm hopeful that there'll be a lot more content that'll be developed around this.
Absolutely. And that I'm going to ask the question as a doctor who has invented into the VR world, that must have been quite challenging, which you've described that. Can you share with our listeners what was one of your biggest challenges you faced when you were melding medical practices with VR to improve the patient experience?
At the very heart of it, Alan, I would say is creating the team. And I want to have a little disclosure for your listeners. I am a leadership junkie. So I will just say that right off the bat. I love leadership. I study leadership. I teach leadership to our trainees here. I actually design courses at the national level about leadership. So, full disclosure, I am a leadership junkie. And the reason that's important is I had to very strategically say, how am I, without any resources, going to be able to develop some virtual reality prototypes? How am I going to do that? Because remember, when I first started, this was back probably in 2016, 2017. And my first grant money was in 2015. And again, as I mentioned, being an early adopter, I was really the only one at that time at my institution that I was aware of. There may have been others that I wasn't aware of, but that I was aware of who had this interest. And as I began thinking about that, I said, gosh, I don't have a grant. I had a small amount of grant money, but it wouldn't have been enough to do the whole thing and assemble a team. I said, how am I going to solve this problem? And so what I decided to do was think very creatively, very outside the box, and think I work at an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center, but I don't have artists, I don't have programmers, and I certainly don't have any virtual reality thought leaders. Where am I going to find such a combination? Fortunately, being in Tampa, we're very fortunate in Sarasota, which is an hour south, we have the number 3 art school in the world. And some of your listeners may be very familiar with Ringling College of Art and Design, an absolutely amazing institution. They have all sorts of majors, creative writing, the only undergraduate virtual reality major, at least back in 2018. They have illustration, they have fine art, a really amazing bunch of individuals at the school. So I started thinking, what if I could approach them on behalf of the Cancer Center and start to develop a collaboration? And so I was very fortunate that one of my colleagues here saw the vision that I did and said, absolutely, let's do it. So we approached the president of Ringling College, who immediately was on board. And it took a year, but we had to get the lawyers involved to figure out how we were actually going to do this. And a year later, we actually did a red carpet event at our center where we showed a 360 video that had been produced. And we started thinking about this is how we're going to work together. And it's funny, Alan, because I remember the president of Ringling College saying to me, Sarah, I love this collaboration. I think it's wonderful. But what are you actually going to do first? And what is your timeline? I really want to make sure this moves forward. And I sit here today speaking to you now in 2023, saying what I told him came true. I told him, I said, the first project we're going to do is we're going to make a virtual reality prototype, which we now have made. We've won awards for it. We've tested it, as I've mentioned. And so I can look back now and say, hey, this team that we assembled together came through and we actually achieved the vision in a relatively short amount of time. Because remember, COVID was mixed in there. And so to get back to your original question and finish the thought, what I have really learned is leading a team that is interprofessional. So I'm an MD. On my team, I was very fortunate. I have a physicist who's a PhD physicist. I had our chief digital officer at our institution. I had a Hollywood futurist who is an amazing board member at my institution. And then I had the capital, the thought capital at Ringling College. I had the head of the department. I had multiple professors in that undergraduate major, and I had the most amazing students. And Alan, just to finish this thought, I was so impressed with the students at Ringling College. They were bright, creative, innovative. And what I loved about them is they really understood this was about the patient. And it really touched me that the students really focused on that and they were very motivated. What can we do to make this the best patient experience so that the patient can get the treatment that they need? And just to finish the thought, to me, what I really learned, it was about the team and how do you create a multidisciplinary interprofessional team and how do you work forward to achieve a mutual goal? And so really my hat's off to the team. It was really through the amazing capability of the team. And by the way, there was one other amazing person that I neglected to mention, and that is a thought leader in the space who's somebody I got to know through Ringling College, who ended up having his own virtual reality company. And this gentleman was a true thought leader in the virtual reality space and had actually been thinking about virtual reality for 20 years. And he was adjunct professor at the university. And so once he came on board too, we were really off to the races. So it's very exciting to think about the teamwork.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hoff. And I'd like to just highlight a couple of the key points that you made that especially I think will resonate with our listeners. And that is you face the age-old challenge virtually every inventor does in one form or another. How do I go forward to achieve this big goal with limited resources that I currently have. And you took a step back and you said, put together a team. Who else might be interested? Who else could help me? Who else would see really the vision of how we could use VR and move it into the medical space? And then the moment of the Ringling College of Art and Design, just down the road an hour from you. And then when you brought those students in, here's a lot more bright minds who are on board as well. And then beginning to meld and put these pieces together to create, I would presume, a budget that wouldn't have been there otherwise. But now you've got everybody on board and with buy-in. So I think that's an amazing story.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And by bringing everyone together, I was able to use the grant money that I had actually been awarded in 2015 to fund the project. Because it was students and because the university, Ringling, was very invested in this, we were able to work it out. So it was basically a prototype, not a huge budget. You could always make it better and add more things, etc. But really proof of concept. And I, as a physician, I really wanted to know myself, how are my patients going to respond to this? Because as you mentioned to your listeners, Alan, I practice in Florida. Many of our patients here are over 65, over 70. Many of them probably have never been in virtual reality. And so I, as an inventor, had to say, okay, I know I want to do this, but is it really practical and feasible? How are my patients going to respond to this? And what I found was, as long as it's done in a carefully supervised way, and when I first started this, again, talk about resources, I actually used one of my medical students because my medical student worked with me for the summer. And so I was able to have my medical student sit with each patient and very carefully and reassuringly explain to them the process and what they needed to do. So it's been quite an adventure, and I have no idea where it's going to go from here, but it's been very exciting so far.
As we roll towards a close, I'd like to ask you, are there any parting words that you'd like to leave us with?
I think really you struck it before, and that is innovation takes a team. Yes, you can have the vision. Yes, you can have the ideas. But when you have to execute, it really is helpful if you have a coalition of like minded folks that you have engaged and that you can all go forward in the same direction. So, that I think is inspiring for people out there, that it's possible when you feel like you're alone in the forest and you're by yourself. Start little by little reaching out to others, find those connections, find those people who are interested. Maybe they're not overtly known, and maybe you have to do a little digging to find them. But once you find them, bring them together for the common purpose. And it's amazing to me, the sky's the limit. So that would be my parting words. It's a leadership thing, vision and execution. And the best part of that is having a team by your side.
Thank you so much. And Sarah, my last question for you then is, how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions?
I'm happy to take anyone's email. So if anyone, I don't know if we can put it on the screen, or I'm happy to give it to you. It's very simple. It's my first name, Sarah, dot my last name, H as in Harry, O, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, E, at Moffitt, that's two F's, two T's, .org. So I'm very much on my email all the time. So feel free to shoot me an email. And if there's something we need to discuss, let's set up a Zoom. Let's set up a time to talk. So I appreciate the opportunity, Alan. I love talking about creative things with other creative folks. So really, I applaud you and your listeners for having this chance to get together and share ideas. I think it's simply wonderful.
Thanks again for giving us that information where they can reach you directly. And again, it's Sarah with an H Hoffe, Hoffe, at Moffitt, Moffitt, right?
Yes,
.org. And they can reach you there. And
absolutely.
I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and describing how you've really brought two different worlds together with VR to create some new solutions that were really needed for patients. And I'd like to leave the opportunity open to maybe another 6 months or a year to touch bases with you and see where you are at that time.
Absolutely. I would be happy to. And I'll throw this out if there's any interest in this. Our next project, and this is not directly related to my job at Moffitt, but on my own, about 20 years ago, I had the idea to write a series of children's books with subliminal medical messages. Because as we've been talking about today, I take care of patients who are diagnosed with cancer. Being a provider, I'm always interested in how can we give positive messages to prevent people from getting cancer, since some cancers are related to lifestyle exposures. And what can I do as a provider to give back? And so maybe in 6 months, Alan, I'll have more to tell you about a series of children's books that we're developing in virtual reality, augmented reality, and perhaps some other platforms as well.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. Again, I'd just like to thank you again for being here, and I think we'll be talking to you again soon.
Wonderful. I appreciate your time, Alan, and so nice to meet everybody today virtually. So keep going, everybody. You have great ideas and they will happen. So don't give up and be perseverant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you've listened to this podcast for a bit, you know I'm a big fan of licensing inventions, right? Well, let me ask you, would you like to learn insider secrets to licensing your invention? How about a licensing masterclass with 7 keys to licensing your invention? And why your 30-second pitch is crucial and how to make yours solid so they want to say yes to your invention. What if you could get all of this in an info-packed live webinar for free? Now you can. Just register for our License Your Invention webinar. The webinar is coming to you live via Zoom meeting on Thursday, July 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't wait. Just go to www.alanbeckley.com/license to register now. Remember, it will be live and totally free of cost to our podcast listeners. But you must register now if you want to join us on Thursday, July 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, all the details are at alanbeckley.com/license. Register now, and we'll see you on Thursday in the free licensing masterclass. So you're done searching for your product, and it's not out there. Yay! Maybe you filed for a provisional patent and done some marketing research or surveys. Heck, maybe you've even created a rough prototype, then found that, although it kind of works, it looks like something from the Stone Age. You'd be embarrassed to show it to your friends, much less to a manufacturer for a licensing pitch. What if I could put you in touch with a guy who offers free consultations, takes no money down, no money up front, and will give you a quote on your project before he starts? What if I told you that this same guy can help you design your product and make you a virtual prototype before you ever put a penny into building a physical one? What if I told you he could make you patent drawings, CAD files for manufacturing, and even make marketing videos and build you a website? If this sounds like someone you want to talk to, let me introduce you to my first podcast sponsor, Brian Keast at I Draw Dreams for Inventors. With 3.5 years of trade school and 15 years of mechanical experience working as a mechanic for General Motors, you have someone that's seen countless design failures and how they were fixed. Also, he had a 25-year career as a general contractor who designed his own houses and remodels on computer-aided design. In getting plans through countless building departments, he gained a tremendous amount of experience by working directly with structural engineers. The many years of combined experience in these two careers gave him a unique look into stresses and failures in design. He brings this wealth of knowledge and experience to his company, I Draw Dreams, as the CAD guy who will design a product for you that will work. Every inventor I've referred to Brian has come away delighted with the work he has done for them, and I think you will too. Just make sure to tell them that Alan sent you. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.